Do you believe people can really change? Or do they just get better at hiding things?
They didn't even have the nerve to call. That's the part one keeps circling back to, like a song you hate but can't stop humming. This whole thing started not with a conversation, not even a sharp confrontation, but with a damn group text message, casual as hell. Like they were inviting me to a potluck I'd never agreed to. It came in on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks before Christmas, just as I was finishing a spreadsheet for a small local bakery I've been helping with taxes. My phone buzzed once, and I glanced down, expecting it to be a reminder for my annual mammogram. Instead, I saw their names Emma, Josh, and, strangely, Mike's. That alone gave me a chill. They never text me together unless someone's birthday's been forgotten or somebody needs money. I opened it. The message was short. Direct. Too neat for something this cruel. Hey Mom, we've all been talking and decided this year we're keeping Christmas more low-key. Just something quiet, just us. No drama, no stress. We figured it might be better for everyone if we each do our own thing this year. We still love you. Hope you understand. I stared at the message so long that the screen dimmed and went dark in my hand. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My brain registered the words, but my body didn't quite catch up, like I was freezing from the inside out. I read it again, slower this time, waiting to see if there was more. Some kind of joke. A smiley face. Just kidding. There wasn't. They said us, but us didn't include me. My own kids, my ex-husband, and probably Nancy, his step-forward wife's second act with her ever-bouncing blonde curls, and her obsession with holiday centerpieces, had drawn a little circle of peace, and decided I didn't belong inside it. And here's what hit me hardest. They made it sound so reasonable, like they were protecting me, as if exiling someone could ever be spun as a loving gesture. For nearly 3 full minutes, I didn't breathe right. Just sat there with the phone on the desk, staring at it like it might rewrite itself if I stared hard enough. I felt like a fool. Not an angry fool. Not yet. Just a tired one. I'd spent the week planning the dinner, prepping my shopping list, digging out the good plates, the gold-rimmed ones they always pretended not to care about but still managed to take photos with every year for their social feeds. I'd bought wrapping paper. I'd defrosted the turkey. I even ordered the damn peppermint bark Emma likes that costs more per ounce than filet mignon. I typed a reply. Understood. Wishing you all a peaceful Christmas. That's it. One line. No punctuation, not even my usual passive-aggressive smiley. Just the cold, empty breath of acceptance. Then I pressed send, turned off the oven, and scraped the cookie dough I'd made into the trash. The bag smelled like cinnamon and betrayal when I tied it shut. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up watching the glow of the tree in the living room, the one I decorated by myself while replaying a memory that now seemed almost staged. Last year, Emma walked in late, phone in hand, barely making eye contact. Josh brought his girlfriend, whose name I still can't remember, and they sat on the couch the whole time whispering and giggling like middle schoolers while I poured wine for everyone and refilled plates like a damn waitress. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody helped clean. And when I got misty-eyed during the toast, after all, it was the first Christmas without my dad, they exchanged that look. The one that said, "Here she goes again." And now, this year, they didn't even want me there to ruin their curated peace. They'd rather have eggnog with Nancy and her ceramic reindeer collection than deal with my drama, which, translated from passive-aggressive adult children, just means feelings they don't want to deal with. Here's the thing they forgot. I wasn't just their mother. I was their lifeline. I was the one who stayed up refinancing the house when Mike disappeared into his midlife crisis and decided he'd rather explore himself than help pay for soccer cleats. I was the one who took on freelance accounting gigs during chemo so the kids wouldn't have to see me cry. I was the one who skipped vacations, birthday dinners, and yes, new clothes for 5 straight years so that their college accounts would grow. I didn't ask for applause. I didn't expect roses. But I sure as hell didn't expect this. By sunrise, something inside me shifted, not exploded, but clicked, like the closing of a vault door. Not rage. Not even heartbreak. Something colder. Heavier. I realized that if they wanted peace without me, I could give them that. I could give them more peace than they knew what to do with. I sat down at my desk again, this time not to work, but to open a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months, the Shared Family College Fund. The one I set up the day Emma got accepted to university. The one I never made legally binding. The one under my name, my rules, my money. My hands didn't even tremble. I typed in the password, unlocked the account, and just stared at the numbers. The balance blinked back at me like it was daring me to move. Nearly $92,000. I remembered the way Emma once casually referred to it as her money, like I had just been the delivery system for her future. I thought of the way Josh always said, "You got it, Mom," right before charging something to the card I gave him for gas, but somehow always ended up at Best Buy. That money wasn't theirs. Not legally. And clearly, not emotionally either. That's when I said the words out loud, to no one but the dark room around me. "Let's see how peaceful you like it when the Wi-Fi's gone and tuition's late." I clicked transfer. The screen prompted me to choose an account. I didn't hesitate. And that, my dear sweet kids, was the moment your peaceful little Christmas officially began. Let's see how far peace gets you when the woman you took for granted disappears and takes everything with her. There's something grotesquely humbling about realizing that the only time your name comes up in a conversation is when a bill needs to be paid, a subscription renewed, or a problem quietly fixed without fuss. And for years I convinced myself that this was just motherhood, that the invisible labor, the endless stream of giving, and the constant presence in the background was somehow noble, that there was grace in being taken for granted. I wrapped my sacrifices in silence like they were gifts, as if swallowing my own exhaustion was a badge of honor. But sitting at my kitchen table that morning after I closed the college fund and cut the phone plan, I started to see things clearly, maybe for the first time in decades. I wasn't a mother in their eyes anymore. I was a system. A resource. A line on their monthly statements they didn't bother to think twice about. I was the damn wallet. And once the wallet closed, suddenly, I had their attention. It started with Josh. He texted first, innocent enough, at least on the surface. "Hey, is the Wi-Fi down at your place too?" That place. Not home. Not your house. Just your place, like I was a roommate he hadn't seen in a while. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to play games, but because silence, as I'd recently learned, has a language of its own. An hour later came the next message: "Netflix is logged out on the TV. Did you change something?" Still no hello. Still no acknowledgement of the Christmas text. Just a little flare of entitlement flickering in the dark. By noon, Emma chimed in, her tone clipped and annoyed. "I'm not trying to be rude, but I can't access my insurance portal. Did you remove me from the policy?" There it was. Not a single question about how I was. Not a single attempt to backpedal or explain the cold, calculated group text that told me to sit out the one holiday I spent 11 months out of the year preparing for. Just the sudden realization that the things they'd never thanked me for had been pulled out from under them, and the rug burn was beginning to sting. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought I'd sulk in my house like a wounded animal, waiting for scraps of guilt or a forced invitation out of pity. But I wasn't broken. I was wide awake. And what they failed to understand was that the only thing more dangerous than a woman who's been used is a woman who realizes it and decides to shut off the faucet. You see, when Mike and I split, it wasn't some dramatic courtroom drama with shouting and lawyers and bitter custody battles. It was slow, almost polite, like two colleagues ending a long project that had run its course. We agreed on joint custody. We agreed to stay friends for the kids. What we didn't talk about, what I didn't even realize at the time, was how easily I'd taken on the bulk of the work without even noticing. It started with the after-school pickups. Then the tuition paperwork. Then the medical stuff. Then the car insurance. Then the phones. The streaming. The gym memberships. The credit cards. They stayed on my accounts because it was easier than disrupting their lives, and because Mike, with his endless charm and his infuriating ability to talk his way out of responsibility, always managed to slip away just when it was time to sign the check. And Nancy, oh Nancy, she slid in like a shadow. She played the long game. She never raised her voice. She never disrespected me outright. She was sugar-sweet and smiley, always grateful for my generosity, always bringing a store-bought pie to Thanksgiving with a handwritten tag that said, "Love you," in looping cursive like we were best friends from a sitcom. But she knew exactly what she was doing. Every time she added herself to another one of my services, every time she offered to help plan something and then backed out at the last minute, she was carving out her territory in my family, step by smiling step. The worst part? I let her. I let all of them. Because somewhere along the line, I started believing that the only way to keep my family intact was to keep the machine running smoothly, even if I was the one fueling it with parts of myself I couldn't afford to lose. I thought if I just kept saying yes, they'd see me. They'd appreciate me. But they didn't. They just got used to the lights being on, the bills being paid, the problems being fixed before they even noticed them. So I shut it all down. I called the health insurance company and removed Emma and Josh from the plan. Not illegally, just administratively. They're both over 18. They can get their own. I canceled the shared credit card that Josh used for his emergencies, which, based on the past 6 months of statements, included 3 concert tickets, a spontaneous weekend trip to Vegas, and a pair of sneakers that cost more than my monthly car payment. I reset the passwords on all the streaming services. I took my name off the auto-pay for Emma's gym membership. I deleted the saved addresses from my Amazon account. And then I sat back, folded my arms, and waited. The silence didn't last long. Mike called first. His voice was low and slippery, trying to sound understanding, but layered with that passive condescension he always used when he thought I was overreacting. "Lisa," he said, "I know that message wasn't ideal, but can we not blow this out of proportion? The kids just wanted some space." I almost laughed. Space. That's what they called it. Not exile. Not abandonment. Space. As if they were astronauts floating in orbit and I'd somehow misunderstood their need for oxygen. I didn't reply. I just hung up. The next day, Nancy emailed me. Not called. Emailed. Like it was a customer service issue. She wrote, "I hope we haven't caused any hurt feelings. This time of year can be so emotionally charged. We just wanted to simplify things. You're still very loved, of course." Of course. That was the cherry on top. As if love could be tacked onto the end of a sentence like a disclaimer after a breakup. I didn't answer her either. I sat in the quiet of my living room with a cup of strong black coffee and the kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. There was no background noise, no hum of demands, no text messages asking for last-minute favors. Just peace, the very thing they claimed to want. And now they had it. But what none of them realized, what hadn't yet dawned on them as they scrambled to fix the cracks I left behind, was that this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was an audit. And I had receipts. The mother they'd depended on, the ex-wife they tolerated, the woman they dismissed, she was gone. What was left was someone who remembered every forgotten thank you, every minimized sacrifice, every time they acted like my love was just another monthly subscription they were entitled to renew without effort. They wanted peace? They just got war by subtraction. There's a certain irony, almost poetic in its cruelty, in how people only begin to examine their behavior toward you when the money stops flowing, when the faucet they've been drinking from so effortlessly begins to sputter, and they finally feel the thirst you've been swallowing for years. It wasn't until I transferred every last dollar out of the so-called college fund, which, let's be honest, was never truly theirs in any legal sense and certainly not in any emotional one, that I finally saw them, clearly unfiltered. Stripped of all the carefully curated politeness and passive familial obligation they'd draped over themselves like holiday garland for years. That money, the one they spoke about as if it were a birthright or some inevitable inheritance carved into stone, wasn't theirs by any law and certainly not by the way they treated me. The truth is, the account they thought they had dibs on wasn't some magical pot of gold that materialized because I was lucky or because I didn't know what else to do with it. That fund existed because I fought tooth and nail for decades to build it, not with easy windfalls or reckless optimism, but with calculated frugality, relentless spreadsheets, and thousands of quiet sacrifices no one ever saw or even thought to ask about. That money came from the inheritance my mother left me, money I could have used to finally take a breath after years of living in survival mode. But instead I earmarked every cent for the future of my children, assuming, foolishly, as it turns out, that someday they'd see that and understand what it meant. I guess I always hoped they'd look at that fund and say, "She really believed in us." But I realize now that they never looked at it at all, except to mentally deduct future tuition payments like they were already on the books, forgetting entirely that someone had to earn what they were planning to spend. When my mother passed, it wasn't sudden, but it still gutted me. She'd been my one constant, the only person who could make me feel like maybe I wasn't losing my mind during those early years of single motherhood when I was working late nights reconciling accounts, making dinosaur-shaped sandwiches for lunchboxes, and taking Tylenol in the dark to numb the pain in my back. She didn't leave me a fortune, but she left enough to offer security, enough to make a plan. And I made the mistake of letting Emma and Josh know about it. I didn't show them the numbers, but I told them Grandma wanted them to go to school debt-free if possible. I told them that I'd do everything in my power to make that happen. They took that as gospel, not as a gift. I remember one night, maybe 2 years ago, standing in the kitchen while Emma scrolled through her phone, half listening as I explained that we might need to move some money around depending on her grad school choices. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes, and said, "It's not like you worked hard for that money. Grandma just left it to you." I froze. Not because I was hurt, though I was, but because in that moment, I understood something I'd been too afraid to admit. She didn't see me. Not really. She didn't see the hours, the missed dinners, the coupons, the nights I cried behind a locked bathroom door. She just saw an account with her name mentally scribbled on it. A check, not a person. A balance, not a mother. So I did what they never imagined I would. I transferred the entire balance, every penny, into a new private account, one that only I could touch. I didn't even give it a name that referenced them. I called it Restart. That word alone felt revolutionary. I used a portion of it to pay off the last of my mortgage, a debt I had carried like an iron vest for over 20 years. I booked myself a 2-week trip to Costa Rica, nothing extravagant, just enough sand and ocean to remind me that life exists beyond text chains and credit card alerts. And I moved the rest into a low-risk fund under my name only, locked tighter than Fort Knox. The first call came from Emma. She didn't lead with love. She didn't even ask how I was. Her voice was thin, tight with panic disguised as concern. "Hey, I tried to access the tuition site, and it says the expected payment wasn't received. Did something get messed up with the account?" I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to rationalize a mistake I had clearly made on her behalf. I didn't answer. I listened to the voicemail twice, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity. It was amazing how quickly affection turned to interrogation when money vanished. Josh was more direct. His text, unpunctuated and full of spelling errors, read, "Mom, what's going on with the fund? Did you close it? I needed that for spring semester." "No, please. No, thank you." Just an expectation, suddenly unmet, and a confusion that someone they had dismissed might actually draw a boundary. Mike, ever the peacemaker with a soft voice and a sharper agenda, emailed me, because apparently we've all abandoned phone calls now, with the subject line, "Let's talk." He wrote, "Lisa, I understand you're upset. I'm not trying to take sides, but maybe we can figure this out together? The kids are really stressed, and I know you care about their future." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because for over a decade, I was the future. I was the planner, the builder, the financial backbone, the one who didn't blink when the braces bill came in or the car needed repairs or somebody suddenly wanted to study abroad in Barcelona for the summer. And not once did any of them stop to ask how I was managing, how I was sleeping, how I was doing emotionally, spiritually, physically. They just kept accepting what I gave and bracing for more. The final insult came not from my children, not even from Mike, but from Nancy, who sent a bouquet of lilies, white, of course, always with the drama, and a card that read, "We never meant to make you feel excluded. Please don't let this one misunderstanding ruin everything you've built for them." Everything I built. She had the gall to frame my exit as a tantrum, to package her condescension in cursive handwriting and seasonal flowers, as if her civility could gaslight me back into place. I left the flowers in the sink. I opened a bottle of Merlot I'd been saving for an occasion that never seemed to come. And I drank the first glass slowly, listening to the wind through the trees outside my kitchen window, feeling, for the first time in years, that I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. They wanted independence. They wanted peace. They wanted freedom from my presence. So I gave it to them. But I also took with me the one thing they never thought to thank me for. And somehow, I think they're only just beginning to understand what that actually means. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but wraps around your body like a wet blanket, heavy and unrelenting, and it's not the absence of noise that defines it, it's the absence of need, of expectation, of that daily hum of obligation that most people mistake for connection. And as I sat there on Christmas Eve, not with my children, not around a table of laughter and forced politeness, not even scrolling through obligatory holiday texts, but alone, entirely and fully, in the glow of my small living room lamp, I realized that the stillness I once feared was not a void, not a punishment, not a vacuum I needed to fill, but rather a form of peace I had never allowed myself to consider. Because when you grow up as the fixer, the caretaker, the keeper of traditions, and the manager of other people's needs, silence feels like failure until one day it doesn't. One day it becomes relief. It had been 6 days since I blocked every one of their numbers. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed to prove a point, but because I was done performing the role they wrote for me without my consent. I was no longer interested in being the emotional janitor who came running with a mop every time someone else's mess splattered across the floor. My phone, once a constant buzzing nag of notifications, now sat face down, quiet as a stone, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone to remember I existed. I had spent the day volunteering at the local shelter, not because I was trying to make the best of it, but because I needed to see humanity in its raw form, stripped of family photos, curated Instagram trees, and the sickly sweet taste of sugar-coated betrayal. The men and women I served didn't ask me where my kids were, didn't tilt their heads with pity or speak in that careful voice people use when they're not sure if you're sad or just awkward. They didn't ask anything at all. They simply received. They took what was offered with hands that shook not from entitlement, but from cold and hunger and gratitude. And in that unspoken exchange, I felt more dignity than I had around my own table in years. That night, after the dishes were done and the folding chairs stacked and the last of the donated pie slices handed out, I drove home in the kind of quiet that used to make my throat tighten. But now it felt like driving through fog without flinching. The streetlights blurred across the windshield, and as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the porch light was still on, not because I forgot to turn it off, but because, out of habit, I had left it burning for people who no longer knocked. Inside, the tree stood as I had left it, modest, undecorated, with only a few white lights wound around its branches, blinking softly like the heartbeat of something long asleep. I had bought it out of reflex in early December, thinking maybe this year would be different. Maybe the kids would step up, bring the energy, the warmth, the closeness I used to dream about. But instead, like every year since Mike remarried and Nancy began her slow, smiling occupation of the family's emotional center, I ended up decorating alone, watching the shadows from the lights flicker across the wall while the voices on the TV kept me company. Now I didn't even bother to turn the lights on fully. I moved through the house like a ghost who'd finally accepted she was dead, not out of sadness, but from the understanding that haunting people who refuse to see you is a waste of time. My kitchen was spotless, my living room empty, and the gifts I bought weeks earlier sat untouched in the hall closet, still in the original shopping bags, receipts stuffed inside like apologies I no longer owed. Around 10:30, I poured myself a glass of wine, not to toast, not to celebrate, but simply to mark the moment, to acknowledge that time was still passing even if nothing else seemed to move. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the neighbors across the street laughing, their silhouettes moving behind the curtains like characters in a show I no longer wanted to watch. And then, The phone rang. It startled me, not because of the sound, but because for a brief second I thought maybe, just maybe, someone had broken through the firewall I'd put up around myself. The screen said unknown number, and my breath caught, not from fear, but from instinct. Part of me still hoped, still wondered, still wanted someone to care enough to try harder. I answered. The voice on the other end wasn't Emma's. It wasn't Josh's. It wasn't Mike's. It was someone I barely remembered, Emma's boyfriend, I think, the one with the corporate job and the perfect teeth who always looked at me like I was an inconvenient smell. He cleared his throat and said, "Hey, I know I probably shouldn't be calling, but they're kind of freaking out. Emma especially." She didn't mean it, the whole message thing. She just thought you'd understand. Understand what, exactly? That it was easier to exclude me than to acknowledge me? That they preferred peace without the person who paid for every dish they broke, every therapy session they skipped, every opportunity they now pretended to have created on their own? That my absence was more comfortable than my presence, as long as the benefits kept coming? I didn't say a word. After a few seconds, he muttered, "They really are sorry," and I heard him waiting for me to respond, to offer some maternal softness, to say something that would alleviate the weight of their guilt. But I didn't. I just let the silence stretch out, an ocean between us, until he quietly hung up. Later that night, while the world counted down to midnight with champagne and noise, I sat on the floor in my living room, barefoot and wrapped in a blanket, watching old home videos on my laptop. The kind where the kids are still small, their voices high and shrill, their eyes full of need and wonder. Emma, 6 years old, wearing a glittery red dress, handing me a crumpled drawing of our house covered in hearts. Josh, barely 4, yelling, "Mama, look," as he waves a string of tinsel like a sword. And in the background, me thinner, younger, smiling so wide it almost hurt to look at, filming them with one hand while holding a hot glue gun in the other. I let myself cry. Not because I missed them as they are now, but because I missed the versions of them that hadn't yet learned how to stop seeing me. I let the tears come because they were real, and unlike the gifts stacked in the garage, unopened and unlabeled, these emotions weren't performative. They were raw, necessary, and for once, entirely mine. They had always assumed I'd be there. Now, for the first time, they were beginning to understand what my absence truly meant. And perhaps, in that void, they would finally realize that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth. And the truth is, I am no longer the woman who waits. Christmas morning arrived not with fanfare, not with music or cinnamon or the rustle of wrapping paper under a tree, but with a hollow kind of stillness, the kind that doesn't bother pretending it's peaceful. The kind that simply exists without apology or decoration. The light outside was thin and gray, filtered through a blanket of low clouds that seemed to mute the world like a thick pane of frosted glass, and as I moved through the quiet of my own house, not a single thing felt wrong, yet not a single thing felt celebratory either. The stockings hung untouched, not because I had forgotten, but because I had deliberately chosen not to fill them. The kitchen remained pristine, not because I had no plans, but because I had no guests, and for once, that emptiness wasn't tragic. It was deliberate, it was earned, and it was mine. I walked past the stack of boxes by the entryway without slowing down, without even a glance toward the glossy ribbons or the pretentious gold foil paper that Nancy so obviously picked out, because her aesthetic has always been more important than sincerity. The gifts began arriving 3 days ago, each one a silent apology, a peace offering wrapped in the illusion of tradition. As though a late shipment of perfume or a pair of Bluetooth earbuds could rewind a decade of emotional erosion and buy back a seat at the table they told me to step away from. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction, not even the courtesy of rejection. I would not send them back. I would not unwrap them. I would not give them the performance they expected from me, because the truth is, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And that's where I had finally landed, after a month of mourning something I now see never really existed in the first place. In the quiet of that morning, as I sipped my coffee in the same robe I'd worn every Christmas morning for 15 years, I realized that I didn't need their forgiveness, and I didn't need their understanding. What I needed was the space to exist without constantly shrinking myself to make other people more comfortable. I didn't need their sugar-coated regret, their too-late acknowledgments, or their seasonal repentance that would melt away the second the tree was taken down and the decorations boxed up for another year of emotional distance disguised as personal boundaries. What I needed, what I had finally given myself, was freedom. I opened my laptop and typed in the password for the new account I had created, the one where I had moved every last cent of the college fund they once claimed without asking. The balance blinked back at me, steady and untouched, and instead of guilt, I felt a strange calm. This money, for once, was not for them. It wasn't earmarked for tuition, or car repairs, or emergency dental visits, or any of the endless line items that had defined my motherhood. This money was for me to build something, to explore something, or to simply live without apologizing for my own needs. For the first time in my adult life, my finances were untethered from anyone's expectations but my own. The email notifications started trickling in mid-morning, first from Emma, who had apparently been trying to call from different numbers again, and then from Josh, whose subject line was simply, "Please open this." I didn't. I scanned the first few lines in the preview window, not out of temptation, but out of instinct, and the words jumped out at me with the same theatrical regret that always followed one of their too much moments. Josh's message read, "Mom, I know I messed up, but you're not even answering. Can't we just talk? I miss you." I didn't mean what I said. He hadn't said anything, though. That was the point. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't questioned the exclusion. He hadn't asked what I felt. He had simply gone along with it because silence, for him, was always easier than conflict, and now that silence was being served back to him, he didn't like the taste. And then there was the envelope. It had arrived on Christmas Eve, slid through the mail slot by hand, not postmarked, not stamped. Just my name in slanted handwriting I recognized instantly, Josh's, uneven and oddly careful, like he had sat at a table trying to make it look more heartfelt. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even moved it from where it landed, half-tucked under the hallway rug. But this morning, something compelled me to at least pick it up. I held it in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of it, wondering what revelations could possibly be inside that would shift the axis of what I now believe to be true. Maybe he had finally seen it all, maybe he had connected the dots, traced the years back to the source, and finally grasped who I really was beneath the mother he had grown accustomed to using as a safety net. But then I realized something that stopped me cold. Even if he had, it wasn't my job to read it, or to comfort him, or to allow him access to my pain on his schedule. So I placed the envelope back on the shelf where I kept expired coupons and unread junk mail, and I walked away. Later, as the sky darkened and the houses around me flickered to life with the warm glow of fireplaces and family dinners, I took a long walk through the neighborhood, my coat zipped to my chin, the wind cutting sharp but clean across my cheeks. I passed houses full of noise and cheer, people hugging on porches, kids in matching pajamas posing for photos they would never look at again, and I felt neither envy nor regret. I felt clear. I thought about all the times I had buried my exhaustion to make Christmas magical, about the dozens of turkey dinners I cooked with aching feet and a forced smile, the stocking stuffers bought at midnight after a 10-hour workday, the arguments I swallowed whole so that no one's holiday would be ruined. I thought about how often I had been the glue, the planner, the giver, the referee, and how none of them had ever asked what I needed, what I hoped for, what I feared when the lights were off and the credit card bills came in. I thought about how easily they had decided that my presence was too heavy, too loud, too complicated, and how quickly they realized what my absence actually cost. I returned home to the same unopened gifts and the same unplayed voicemails. I poured myself another glass of wine, opened a new document on my laptop, and typed the first sentence of something I didn't yet know the shape of, but that felt like the beginning of something real. Once upon a time, there was a woman who gave everything she had. Until one day she looked around and realized she didn't owe anyone anything anymore. I stared at the sentence for a long moment, then hit save. As the clock struck midnight, my phone lit up one last time. A voicemail from Emma, time-stamped at 11:58. I watched it flicker on the screen. I didn't press play. Some things are better left unheard, especially when the truth is already louder than any apology. And so this Christmas, I gave them what they asked for: peace. But I took with me something far more valuable than forgiveness. I took back myself.